Hello and thanks for joining us today. I'm over at a friend's farm called Maggie Jane Farms, really just a couple miles over the mountain from Everwilder. And you can see here I'm holding a really beautiful wildflower, and this is what we want to talk about today. It's Echinacea, or purple coneflower, some of the two most common names. And it's a really great plant, really good medicinal herb. And I wanted to show you how to cultivate. I want to show you a couple easy ways to use this, and we're going to actually dig some root here. And the reason we're over here and not at Everwilder is because Everwilder, we're in the second year of our herb farming there. And this field has been seeded, at least 4 or 5 years ago. So we have some very mature Echinacea species. And when we're digging roots, we really want to stick to some 3-year and older plants most of the time. So we're actually going to dig some roots. We're going to take it over to the workspace, and we're going to prepare some of it, talk about preservation and some of the active phytochemicals. So today we want to take you all the way from how to identify how to forage this plant, how to grow it, how to take it and make it into medicine that you can consume. And we'll even give some good recipes and some exact dosages. We have a beautiful morning here in the North Georgia mountains, and the weather's really starting to get cool, and the air feels really good of the mornings, and it's about time to really process and harvest some of these roots, and more than anything, plant more and help sustain some of these medicinal herbs that grow really well here in North Georgia. All right, so what we're looking for here in this field is there's a lot of coneflower. We'll give you some aerial shots, and you can see just how many kind of old, starting to be dried up flower heads there are. And we don't want to harvest all of it by any means. We're only going to harvest a small percentage, but we want to put up enough in tincture form, because Echinacea works fairly well in tincture. It's always better to use fresh herb, or at least freshly dried herb, even in this case in the root. Now the whole plant contains good phytochemicals that all have that kind of immune stimulating or immune modulating aspect. I've heard it said both ways. And if I wanted to dig this root, the first thing I would need to do the first thing I'm going to do is actually harvest the seed heads, because when I pull the plant up, I don't want to be losing seeds. And we're going to harvest seeds on everything that we dig, because we want to replant a lot more of this. And it's not too hard to transplant from seed. You can see it kind of just breaks off, and it can be fairly easily collected. So I've just clipped the seed heads, and you can see if you really get in here and start to tear this apart, you'll get the seeds coming out. And that's what we're looking at right there. The seeds, a little bit of chaff in there that's fairly easy to separate, and these kind of lightish colored prisms here are the seeds, and that's what we want to be sure and collect. And the seeds are very active in the phytochemicals of the plant and can be used for medicinal preparations. Even just chewing on a couple of these seeds, sticking them in your mouth, chewing on them will kind of give you a little bit of a tingling sensation, very similar to spilanthes or the toothache plant that some of y'all may be familiar with. So the seeds can be used, but in this case we're going to save pretty much all of these for planting more little coneflowers. So here we have an example of some coneflowers that we're not going to dig. These produce no flowers this year. You can see they're just getting their start, and this would be too young for good quality medicine. All right, here we have some Echinacea flowering, and we're still not going to dig this. Just 1 or 2 flowers. I really want a 3-year-old plus root, and I would assume that would have multiple flower heads. So here's a coneflower that I do like, and I think we will dig. It's got good mature seed heads on it, so it'll produce a good quality seed that has hopefully good diversity and some good tall stems and at least 3 or 4 stalks. So we've collected a handful of seed heads here, and all we're doing is kind of just busting this up, and it's got this spiny structure, and that's really where the word Echinacea comes from, is the root word there. So it has to do with this spiny structure. And we just bust all these up and we collect it, and it's fairly easily separable from the chaff. You just use a screen or kind of a winnowing technique. And there's tons of this coming up. It germinates relatively easy. If you sow it in trays or in the spot, it might take 1 to 2 years to really start germinating. So we've tried to speed that up a little bit. really it's best sow it in your trays or in your pots in the fall time, leave it outside all winter, and most of it will germinate in the spring. If you're trying to germinate quickly in the spring from dried seed, you can soak them for up to a couple weeks. Some of them will start to germinate in the bag. I don't really like to let that happen because they really want that soil activity, as soon as they start putting on the little roots that come out, and we don't want to leave them in the bag for too long. So some will start to germinate, but you don't want them all to germinate. That's not the goal. You just want to soak them for a couple of weeks, and that can sometimes speed up the germination, sometimes even by an entire season. So there's all these stratification methods, all that kind of stuff. It's better just to let nature do its thing, put it in the pots in fall. Most of it will germinate in the springtime. So we found the plant here that we do want to dig the root of, and it's not that the root is the only part of Echinacea that we can use. The flowers and the aerial parts, even the seeds, are used in medicinal preparations. The root comes to us through a lot of Native American practices. This is a native herb to North America, a little further westward than Georgia is my understanding, but it's definitely here now, and it seems to like it okay. But definitely look into using the other parts of this plant that are a lot more sustainable. Alright, so I'm ready to dig the root commercially. If you had a large field of this or a row of this, you might use a spade or a broad fork and just kind of till the soil a little bit with the fork, and it'll be easier to digging on your roots. In this case, we're just going to use a hori-hori or a soil knife and dig the roots by hand. So it's a little bit slower, but we can be careful to get all the roots and make sure that we're just not causing a big impact on this slope here. The different species of Echinaceas will have different root patterns. As far as I know, probably all species are good and rich in the phytochemicals that you're after here for the medicinal benefit. So I don't like to use kind of the cultivars, the things that are done with the flowers, but this, a good purple coneflower, Echinacea angustifolia purpurea, is really good. There's one in Tennessee that's, lesser known and kind of needs a little bit of help. It needs to be grown a little bit more. It's all proven active, and really all the species, I say, could be used across the board, though some are going to be a little different than others, as with any plant. So I'm just going to kind of loosen my soil around the edges. In fact, I'm actually going to start with chopping the seed heads. Once again, I don't want to lose these seeds. These are going to be put to good use. I'm going to chop those, put them in my cloth, and then I'm going to go ahead and chop off the stems. Now, if I were to use the herbs for medicine, I wouldn't use them at this stage, so we're a little too late in the season. Maybe some of these leaves are fine, but the flower heads you use when they're fresh. The seeds are being collected and could be used, but the leaves, this is getting a little late in the summer for that, so we're going to go for the root as everything's really starting to die back. I'm just loosening the soil here and trying not to damage too many roots, but I don't want to pry too much either. So you gotta grab the root ball and we'll dig around, make sure we got most of it, and get off the dirt we can. It's got a good little knuckle in here. We're going to end up taking these back and washing them off, but we'll take that. We'll leave some of this fresh growth, and we'll put that right in our basket. So I'm getting an initial rinse on these roots, and I'm actually going to go ahead and rinse them for a minute and then stop and chop them up, at least maybe quarter them, so that I can better get this dirt out. So I'm starting to quarter these up, or at least cut them in half, and you'll see this black in here, and I think that's actually a really good indicator of a potent root. And I'm going to chop these up, and then I'm going to wash them a little bit more.
I don't mind that the green stems are in here, because once again, the entire plant is pretty active in phytochemistry that we can appreciate. So a little bit in there, as long as it's good and dry. If I'm doing something dried or if I'm doing it fresh, it really doesn't matter. So at least in a tincture form, I don't mind a little bit of that green stem, though I might end up tossing just a little bit of this as I go. Cutting these roots up just really help be able to clean them a lot better and get that dirt out of there before you start to prepare your herbal extraction. This is maybe the mother lode right here. Just getting that chopped up, and we'd love to see that black rings coming in.
Before we get started, I just want to let you know that I'm definitely not a doctor. I'm not even a clinical herbalist, but I've been experimenting with herbs and particularly Echinacea for several years now and find that it's helpful in treating me and my family on the homestead. It's got a lot of evidence behind it, and it's got a lot of scientific study that proves, even for fairly mainstream media, proves Echinacea can be effective for viral and bacterial infections. So there's a little bit to talk about here when it comes to actually making the medicine with Echinacea. And one of the most important factors about this that I like to share, and that's really amazing about this plant, is it can just be consumed, and it has this immune stimulating, I've also heard it called immune modulating effect. So simply taking a piece of the root here, maybe we take a small slice, a couple grams, and we can just simply chew on that. And over time, that's going to release some effects. You might get a little bit of a tingling feeling if it's really good quality. You know, you can kind of taste and see it. So just kind of chew on that and let it soak in, let it swallow the, you know, with your saliva and all that. And you'll get those chemicals that you're after for that immune stimulating property. So Echinacea also has been widely used for inflammatory conditions and as a general antiviral and antibiotic or antibacterial. I don't like to say a lot of things are general antiviral, but Echinacea is going to stimulate the innate immunity or the instinctual immunity, you know, the things that first come in, the white blood cells that first come in and, you know, start trying to fend things off. So it's going to be a broad spectrum antiviral in that sense. And kind of same with the bacteria, is it really stimulates the body's T cells and those white blood cells that come in as your first line of defense. So there's been some controversy, you could say, that the Echinacea is effective really early on, and then it needs to be stopped use after, you know, 3 days, 5 days, 10 days. I hear a lot of different things. I see a lot of different things in books. And, you know, I can't really say for certain, but through all my research, I found that you could probably use this for a week or two solid. You do want to keep in mind immune fatigue that comes from an overstimulated immune system. I've had one person personally tell me that Echinacea was too much for them, and they possibly with an autoimmune condition. Other than that, I've not seen a lot of people react badly to Echinacea. And just as an update, the piece of root in my mouth is giving off a good buzzing, tingling sensation. If you've ever done spilanthes or like the toothache plant is often what it's called, you get that buzzing electrical type sensation. Some of the same overlap in alkaloids there. So I know this is going to be some good root. It's really starting to tingle my tongue. If I start slurring my speech, you'll know why. So yeah, you know, use it for 3-5 days. I think the point is to use it early on and to use it frequently and somewhat of a high dose. The other things to consider would just, you know, basically it goes back to that immune fatigue. So I'm going to really emphasize this in the first 2 or 3 days when you first think some sort of flu or virus, influenza, cold, something like that's coming on, really hit Echinacea heavy. Most of the dosages I see recommended come about every 2 hours, so you have to do it frequently. Don't mess around with it. A little here, a little in the morning, a little in the evening. It's not going to really provide good efficacy there. It's not going to be as potent. Do it every 2 hours, somewhere between maybe 1,000 milligrams of dried root. If you're doing tincture, it could be a milliliter or two, a whole dropper full or two, up to maybe even a tablespoon. And the dried root is what I want to go back to here and talk a little bit first. So I'm going to start taking this root out and laying it out to cut it up a little bit more, because I'm going to tincture this fresh, and fresh is a really good way to use it. Dried's okay, but I've seen many references that it loses a little bit of potency in the dried state. So we will get all these, mainly these root chunks, these auxiliary roots I'm sure are good to use and fine, but I definitely want to cut up any large crowns that kind of have a bunch of mass to them. And I just want to make it easier for the alcohol to access the plant material and extract all the good things that I'm trying to extract. Vitamin C, sulfur, iron, I think vitamins A and B can all be found in Echinacea. It's going to be good for colds and flus in general, respiratory issues, but also I hear about really good skin being really good for skin conditions, even severe inflammation, poison oak, poison ivy, things like that. I have a formula that I like to use that I'll give you in just a moment. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to start kind of just dicing these up, because I'm going to go ahead and get them straight into my jar here. I'm going to use an empty jar here like this, cut these up and get them inside. So I'm not going to be too crazy about what parts of the plants are in my tincture. These stems, and even if a leaf was in here, it wouldn't bother me at all. Once again, the whole plant is very active with phytochemicals, so all this is going to be good to use. We ended up finding quite a few plants that still had some flower heads that hadn't gone to seed, and a lot of good green leaf material. So it turns out I'm going to go ahead and do a tincture of the leaves and the flower heads that have not turned to seed. Even if they've turned to seed, it can be used in tincture, but it'd be better to just extract the seed and use it directly. So when I tincture herbs and I'm doing something with dried root, I like it to be powdered, and I have some jarred powdered Echinacea purpurea root here, and that's a good way to go, because it allows the alcohol to really get to the chemicals that we're after. In the case of using this fresh, maybe if you had a powerful blender, you could get all this crushed up, but in this case I'm just going to chop it up fairly finely and get in here, and I'm just going to let it really soak for a good amount of time. So I'll leave this in the alcohol a month, maybe more, since it's just fresh root and it's only so finely chopped. So Echinacea is, good to take internally for the immune stimulating effect, but also I would put it in a salve or something like that. Maybe if you're doing a midsummer salve where you're picking a lot of flowers, calendula, and there's plantain in there, there's cleavers and chickweed, maybe put some coneflower leaf in there, and it might even help with a bacterial fighting aid kind of in the salve, and flowers or petals. And once again, the roots could be used as a similar topical application. But also another use for Echinacea is anytime there's pus or redness in the skin and this kind of inflammation on the surface. So good for a salve that way, but I also use tincture topically, especially if there's an infection, maybe a briar pick or a horse snell or something got you in the garden, and it's starting to pus up and fester. You put a couple drops of tincture on the wound topically, and then I would be doing a couple dropperfuls. It could be a milliliter or two every couple hours to take care of any type of infection that's trying to occur. So I really like all these root sections with these crowns, and like I said, the black kind of dots are appearing, and it's really tingling to the mouth, so I know we got some good root here. I'm going to tincture it in a mason jar, and I'm going to do it fresh. Fresh is a really good way to tincture Echinacea. So I'm going to make sure and get a lot of these nice big chunks in here, but I'm also going to just use the auxiliary roots. And I'm not going to get too crazy with measuring and doing my alcohol. This is what I would call a folk tincture, where I'm going to stuff as much as I can or as much as I want to into the jar and cover the top of the herbs with alcohol. For Echinacea, I've seen a lot of people hovering around that 60% alcohol content. So we'll kind of match that, and we'll get all this stuffed full. So Echinacea does good in tincture, and I presumably fairly well in oil, but it also does well in water. And of course, direct consumption makes this plant really special to me. The fact that if you have this growing on your property, you can simply go out and get somebody who might be feeling down or starting to get an itchy throat, something like that. You can go dig up some root and have them chew on the root and get some of that medicine. All right, so since we're using fresh fruit, we're going to go about 60-70% alcohol. That's going to avoid any spoilage of our product and really extract a good concentrate. A quick way to mix this up is, because I like to buy Everclear here, it's 190 proof or 95% alcohol by volume. So this is almost 100% alcohol. This is a pure grain alcohol, and I want to cut it back to that 60-70% level. So if I know here, if I read how much water, and it's distilled water is best, but up here in the mountains sometimes we just use spring water or well water. I have a little over a cup of water in this. So if I brought this to 2.5 cups, I would be with that 50-50% mixture. So I'll bring it up to a little bit less than that, so I get that 60-75% alcohol content. And I'll measure it as I go. I want to bring it up to just about 2 cups. Or really, actually, I said 2.5. So we'll bring it up all the way to the top. All right, so that's a pretty strong mixture. I like finished tinctures to be down around 30%, so a little bit of dilution for children or people that aren't, using tinctures a lot may be good, but I would just take this full strength as well if I really wanted a good impact. So once we get our alcohol to water percentage mixed, we can pour it right in our tincture. We want to pour it slowly. It has time to kind of fill all the nooks and crannies, and I'm going to top it really as far as I can. The less oxygen, the better, and the more the root stays submerged. We'll cap that, and we'll give it a good shake right now. This is a good time to kind of focus on your goals with this medicine. We have Echinacea tincture started. I'll leave this for 30 to 60 days before I strain out the root with some fine cheesecloth, muslin, something kind of fine, because you end up getting little particles in here, and you'll have your refined Echinacea tincture. Better than most of the stuff you buy in the store because you used it fresh. Now, if you're using dried Echinacea, I find it still pretty effective, and it's still something I would do. One of the easiest ways to take it is in pill form, and a lot of people don't think about this as an herbal preparation, but it's really hard to get people to take herbs, and sometimes a pill is something they're used to taking. I have some 00 or some 00 capsules here, and these would hold maybe 1,000 milligrams, maybe 750 milligrams, somewhere in there, depending on how well it was packed. I don't have any type of packing machine or anything like that. I'll simply take my capsule and I bust it apart. And these have been in the sun a minute, so they're starting to degrade. You have your ground root, and you can just kind of get a scoop of that. Now, this is my personal stash here, so I get that in there. You can pack both sides. Once again, I don't go crazy with overpacking it. I just kind of accommodate for how much I think's in there. So I would take 2 capsules this size every 2 hours, or a tablespoon, maybe 1 to 2 milliliters of tincture every 2 hours for these infection and even some inflammatory problems. So we had plenty of flower and leaf to harvest because it's just we're in this transitional period. And I'm going to go ahead and not just let that compost. I'm going to make a tincture of that, and I will use that fresh as well. Any flower heads that haven't already produced viable seed and any good clean leaf matter, I'll get into a fresh tincture with that same 60-70% alcohol. Well, I hope somehow this video helped you with your journey with Echinacea, and I hope that you will go out, grow the plant in your yard, collect seed, collect root, and then continue to spread it around your community. This is a really good medicine that has a lot of good study behind it that I think would be a lot more popular if we didn't have antibiotics like penicillin and things like that. Echinacea would still be heavily used. It was heavily used in the eclectic period of herbalists in Western herbalism. So there's pretty good case studies for Echinacea. If you want to learn more about Echinacea and other herbs that grow in southern Appalachia, and you're ever in Ellijay or North Georgia, come join us, come see us at Everwilder Farm. You can find us online at our website. And we do things like this just all the time, and we really want to emphasize that we can do it for small private groups. I think you can see why Echinacea should be in everybody's home herbal cabinet or medicine cabinet. It's a really great resource. It's easy to grow, and I thank you for joining me today to learn about it.